There's a road law that quietly became compulsory for every single new car sold in this country this month. And depending on who you are, it might not even be the one that actually affects you most. Today we're covering exactly what's changed, who it hits, and why so many drivers are checking the wrong rule while missing the one that actually applies to them. Let's start with the big one, because it's the most concrete, dated change on the table right now. As of this month, every new car sold in the UK, not just brand new models being launched for the first time, but every single new car leaving a forecourt, must be fitted with intelligent speed assistance as standard. This is technically applied to newly designed models since the middle of 2024, but the requirement has now expanded to cover the entire new car market. If you're buying new this year, this is coming with the car whether you asked for it or not. Here's how it actually works, because the name makes it sound more dramatic than it is. The system uses GPS mapping combined with road sign recognition cameras to identify the speed limit on whatever road you're currently driving on in real time. The moment you go over it, you get an alert. In more active configurations, you'll feel a bit of resistance through the accelerator pedal, gently nudging you to ease off. What it is not, and this matters, is a system that takes control of your car away from you. You can override it simply by pressing the pedal firmly, and you can switch the whole thing off manually at the start of every journey. The catch is that it resets itself every time you restart the engine, so if you find it intrusive, you're turning it off again tomorrow, and the day after that. For anyone doing a lot of rural driving where mapping data hasn't quite caught up with a recently changed limit, that's worth knowing, because trusting the system blindly in those areas can actually give you a false sense of confidence about your real speed rather than protecting you from it. Now, if you're not buying a new car this year, that particular rule might not touch your life directly at all, and that's exactly why check if you're affected matters more than any single headline. Let's go through who else is actually in the firing line right now, because the honest answer is, it depends entirely on your situation. If you're a learner driver, or you've got one in the family, the rules around booking your test have tightened considerably this year. You're now limited to 2 changes on an existing booking, full stop. Only the learner themselves is legally allowed to book, change, or cancel their own test, which locks out instructors and third-party booking services that used to buy up slots in bulk and resell them. Cancel with less than 10 working days' notice, and you're looking at losing your fee entirely rather than simply rebooking. If your family's assumption is still the old, flexible system from a couple of years ago, that assumption is now costing people test slots they didn't realize they'd lost. If you're over 70, or getting close to it, there's a genuinely significant shift working its way through government right now, even though it hasn't fully landed yet. Right now, self-declaring your eyesight is fine at renewal is still how the system works. No independent check required. But a formal consultation opened back in January, asking whether that should change to mandatory proof of a recent eyesight test, and whether opticians, rather than drivers themselves, should be the ones responsible for flagging vision problems to the DVLA. That consultation has already closed, and while the final outcome hasn't been published yet, the pressure behind it is real. Nearly 20,000 licenses were pulled for eyesight issues in the space of 3 years, and eyesight-linked collisions rose by more than a quarter in just the last 12 months. If you're in this age bracket, don't wait for the announcement. Get your eyes checked now, regardless of what the rules currently say. Because if this does land as expected, being ahead of it costs you nothing extra. If you're on regular prescription medication and you drive, this one's already happened rather than pending. Updated drug driving threshold limits for a range of prescription medications came into force back in February, the first proper review since the original 2015 regulations. Being on a valid prescription doesn't automatically protect you if you're over the new threshold. You may still need to demonstrate your driving genuinely wasn't impaired. If you haven't checked whether your specific medication falls under the updated limits, that's worth 10 minutes today rather than finding out after the fact. If you're a new driver within your first 2 years of passing your test, the rule that should worry you most isn't any of the ones we've covered so far. It's mobile phone detection. These cameras are now properly active across multiple locations in England and Wales, using infrared and AI recognition, specifically trained to catch a driver holding a handheld device, with a trained reviewer checking the image before anything's issued. The penalty itself hasn't changed, still £200 and 6 points. But for a new driver, 6 points isn't a slap on the wrist, it's an automatic license revocation with no court date required. What's actually changed is how likely you are to get caught, because a camera network scales in a way a single traffic officer standing on a bridge simply can't. If you're a regular motorway commuter, the direction of travel here is worth understanding, even though the headline rule hasn't moved. Following sustained criticism and coroner findings from several fatal collision inquiries, the government has confirmed no new all-lane running smart motorways, the ones with no permanent hard shoulder, will be built going forward. Existing converted sections stay in operation, while a safety improvement program continues, which practically means emergency refuge areas are being added more densely, with spacing coming down from the old average of around 1.5 miles. The red X rule hasn't changed and never will loosen. Treat it exactly like a red traffic light, because automatic detection behind it has gotten faster, thanks to radar-based stopped vehicle detection built into the road itself. Alongside that, average speed camera coverage has expanded well beyond motorways this year, showing up on busy A roads and residential arterial routes in cities like Coventry, Birmingham, and parts of Greater Manchester that never had this kind of continuous enforcement before. If your daily commute used to have the odd fixed camera you knew by heart, don't assume that's still the full picture, because the coverage on familiar routes has genuinely grown. If you're anywhere near retirement age or already own an electric vehicle, there's a separate wave of change worth flagging, even though it's more financial than behavioral. Vehicle excise duty has risen this year, with the standard rate now sitting at £200 annually, and electric vehicles that used to be exempt now pay that same standard rate. From April 2028, electric and plug-in hybrid drivers will also face a new pay-per-mile charge on top of that, checked annually at MOT time. None of that changes how you actually drive, but it's exactly the kind of quiet cost shift that catches EV owners out if they bought expecting the old exemptions to last indefinitely. If you're shopping around for a young or newly qualified driver's insurance, or you are one yourself, keep half an eye on the graduated license proposal still sitting in consultation. The version getting the most attention would restrict driving between 11 at night and 6 in the morning without a supervising driver aged 30 or over for the first 12 months after passing your test, limit passengers under 25 without supervision, and apply a far stricter alcohol threshold during that period. It has real momentum, driven by the fact that drivers aged 17 to 24 account for around a quarter of road deaths, despite being a much smaller slice of license holders overall. But there's no confirmed start date, and no parliamentary time booked yet to actually pass it into law, so treat this as one to watch, rather than something already in effect. There's also a broader drink driving change worth knowing if you're the kind of driver who has the occasional pint and then gets behind the wheel later. The government's road safety strategy proposes bringing England and Wales down from the current 80 milligram limit to 50 milligrams per 100 milliliters of blood, matching the limit that's already been in place in Scotland for years. New drivers would face an even stricter near-zero limit under the same proposal. In practical terms, if this lands as expected, a single pint could be enough to put some drivers over the new line where it previously wouldn't have. This is still consultation stage rather than confirmed law, but it's one of the proposals with genuine cross-party momentum behind it, so it's worth adjusting your own habits ahead of any formal deadline rather than waiting to be told. And regardless of which of these categories you actually fall into, there's one thing that applies to every single driver reading this without exception. Your driving license is going digital, rolling out through something called the gov.uk wallet. But that rollout is still phased and provisional, and younger drivers are first in line. Your physical photo card remains fully valid. There's no date set for phasing it out. What doesn't change regardless of the app's progress is your legal obligation to keep your DVLA details current, your address, any medical conditions that develop or worsen. That duty exists today, app or no app, and letting it slide because you're waiting for a digital rollout that hasn't reached you yet is exactly the kind of assumption that leads to a fine you didn't see coming. There's also a quieter administrative shift worth mentioning that touches almost everyone at some point, even if it doesn't feel like a driving law in the traditional sense. New number plates are issued twice a year, and this year's second batch lands on the 1st of September, switching from the current plate identifier to the next one. If you're planning to buy or sell a car around that date, it's worth knowing which side of the changeover you're on, since it can genuinely affect resale value and buyer expectations, even though it has nothing to do with how you're actually allowed to drive. Similarly, if you're leasing a vehicle or arranging car finance, VAT and insurance premium tax changes affecting advance payment vehicles came into effect this month too, which is easy to miss if you're focused entirely on the headline driving rules and not the paperwork sitting underneath them. So let's bring this together properly, because the honest answer to "Are you affected?" is almost certainly yes, just not necessarily by the rule-making headlines. If you're buying new this year, intelligent speed assistance is now standard, no exceptions. If you've got a learner in the family, the booking system is far less forgiving than it used to be. If you're over 70 or approaching it, get ahead of the eyesight consultation now rather than waiting for the outcome. If you're on prescription medication, check the updated thresholds today. If you're a new driver, mobile phone detection is the one that can actually end your license overnight. If you commute on a smart motorway, the red X remains absolute, even as refuge spacing improves. And whoever you are, your DVLA details need to be current regardless of what the digital rollout is doing. It's genuinely rare for a single driver to sit completely outside every category here, which is exactly why a title like "Check if you're affected" isn't just a hook, it's a fair description of how spread out this year's changes actually are. None of this landed with a dramatic national announcement, a letter through your door, or a press conference explaining exactly how it affects you personally. That's the pattern across almost every driving rule change this year. The rule simply changes quietly in the background, and enforcement catches up before most people notice. The drivers who get caught out are consistently the ones who assumed the old rules, the old flexibility, the old grace periods, still applied. So here's what I'd actually do after watching this. Work out which category above genuinely applies to you, and deal with that one specifically rather than trying to absorb all of it at once. If none of the specific triggers apply to you directly right now, the one universal task still stands: log into your DVLA account and confirm your details are current. If this helped you actually figure out where you stand rather than just adding to a general sense of anxiety, hit subscribe, because more of these changes are landing through the rest of the year, and I'll keep breaking down exactly who each one actually affects. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one.